She was 2 miles from the trail. Search teams had swept this exact area for days. Dogs had worked the terrain. Aircraft had flown overhead. And for 2 years nobody found her. Tonight, we are going into 5 of the most haunting disappearances in the American wilderness. These are not stories of reckless adventurers who ignored warnings. These are experienced, prepared, careful people. People who knew what they were doing, who walked into the mountains and simply ceased to exist as far as the outside world was concerned. In some of these cases, it took years. In others, nearly 4 decades. But eventually, someone walking through the woods came across something no hiker ever wants to find. And the answers, when they finally came, raised almost as many questions as they answered. Case 1. Rudy Motor. Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. Disappeared, February 1983, found, 2021. The Never Summer Mountains had received over a foot of fresh snow the night before. Search teams on skis and snowshoes pushed through the drifts, an avalanche dog ranging ahead of his handler. Aerial teams swept the ridgelines. For 4 days they combed the Box Canyon and Skeleton Gulch areas, up past the 11,000-foot elevation line, through one of the most punishing winter environments in the American Rockies. They found almost nothing. What they did find only deepened the mystery. Rudy Motor was 38 years old when he disappeared, and by every account he was exactly the kind of person who should not have disappeared. Originally from West Germany, he was living in Fort Collins, Colorado, and was described by those who knew him as an experienced winter mountaineer. Not a weekend hiker, but someone who understood the terrain, the weather, and the risks with the seriousness of a professional. On February 13, 1983, he departed from the Zimmerman Lake trailhead on Colorado Highway 17, near Cameron Pass, for a planned 2 to 3 night ski mountaineering trip. His route would take him over Thunder Pass and down into Rocky Mountain National Park. It was a challenging route, but one well within his abilities. He had the gear. He had the knowledge. He had the plan. 6 days later, on February 19th, his roommate realized something was wrong. Rudy was overdue. The call went in to the authorities that same day, and by early the following morning, search operations had begun in earnest. What made the search both more urgent and more baffling were the things they found, and the things they didn't. A food cache belonging to Rudy was discovered at the mouth of Box Canyon, in the northwest corner of the park. Nearby, investigators located a snow cave he had constructed, complete with his sleeping bag and additional gear. The snow cave told them he had made it to the park. He had dug in, found shelter, prepared for the night. And then he had vanished. Search efforts continued for 4 days, coordinated between Larimer County Search and Rescue and Rocky Mountain National Park Search and Rescue teams. Ground teams on skis and snowshoes worked the Box Canyon and Skeleton Gulch areas. Aircraft swept overhead. The avalanche dog worked the terrain that seemed most dangerous. Nothing more was found. That spring and summer, additional search efforts went out. In the decades that followed, Rocky Mountain National Park staff and Larimer County teams continued to check the area periodically. But the mountains kept their secret. 37 years passed. In mid-August of 2020, a hiker moving through the Skeleton Gulch area, part of the original 1983 search zone, came across something near a pile of avalanche debris. Skeletal remains. The investigation that followed was complicated almost immediately by circumstance. A wildfire, the Cameron Peak Fire, closed the area shortly after the discovery. Then the East Troublesome Fire swept through. Then winter came and buried the high-elevation site under snow again. It wasn't until the summer of 2021 that park rangers were able to return and conduct a thorough search of the scene. What they found alongside the remains was significant. Skis, poles, boots, and remnants of personal items believed to belong to Rudy Motor. The FBI Evidence Response Team assisted with recovery. The Grand County Coroner's Office attempted to confirm identification through dental records, but the results were inconclusive. Officials then worked extensively with the German government to obtain records and pursue family notification. The unexplained detail: Rudy Motor's remains were found in the Skeleton Gulch area, a zone that had been part of the intensive initial search in 1983. His snow cave and food cache had already been found nearby. This was not some obscure corner of the wilderness that search teams had never reached. Teams had been through that terrain on skis, on foot, and from the air. His equipment had been identified at the mouth of Box Canyon. How then did a body, with skis and boots, remain undiscovered in a searched area for nearly 4 decades? Rangers who worked the original case have noted that heavy snowfall, avalanche activity, and the extreme terrain of the Never-Summer Mountains could move and bury remains over time. But that raises its own questions. If an avalanche had claimed him, a fate consistent with the terrain and the tools left beside him, why was there no sign found at the time in an area specifically searched by an avalanche dog and handler? The discovery and recovery of Rudy Motors remains closed, a nearly 4-decade-long cold case at Rocky Mountain National Park. What happened in the hours after he left that snow cave may never be fully known. Could an experienced winter mountaineer in familiar terrain simply be swallowed by the mountains without a single recoverable trace for 38 years? Or did the Never-Summer Mountains take him in a way that left no evidence behind, until the land itself finally gave him back? Case 2, Rachel Lakaduck, North Cascades, Washington State. Disappeared, October 2019, found, August 2021. She had chosen the date deliberately. October 17, 2019 was Rachel Lakaduck's birthday. She was 28 years old, from Moses Lake, Washington, and she had decided to celebrate it the way she loved best, alone in the mountains with a trail ahead of her and a night under the stars. Her plan was to hike the hidden lake trail to the lookout cabin, spend the night and return. A birthday trip. She told her family where she was going. She left her car at the trailhead. She set out into the North Cascades. She never came back. The initial search that followed turned up Rachel's car, exactly where she'd left it. But search crews reported something troubling almost immediately. It didn't appear she had made it to the lookout tower. Somewhere between the trailhead and her destination, something had gone wrong. According to a GoFundMe established by Rachel's family, the weather changed while she was on the mountain. Conditions turned inclement, and she wasn't able to get off in time. But the search teams couldn't find her. For 2 years, Rachel Lakaduck remained missing in the North Cascades. And for 2 years people kept looking. Over the weekend of August 14, 2021, a large search group, still actively searching for her nearly 2 years after she disappeared, found her remains in the wilderness where she had last been seen. Her mother, Elizabeth Tripp, wrote on Facebook the Monday after the discovery, "Our beloved Rachel's remains arrived off the mountain yesterday." The unexplained detail: Rachel was familiar with the area. The Hidden Lake Trail is not a technically extreme route. It is a popular, well-traveled path in the Cascades. She had told her family her exact plan. She had left her car at the trailhead. The question that haunts this case is simple and unanswerable. What happened on the mountain that night? The weather turned, but experienced hikers navigate weather. She was between the trailhead and the cabin, a relatively confined corridor. She was found eventually by a team that never gave up. But 2 years passed between the moment she didn't come home and the moment she was found. In an age of GPS and satellite technology with search teams covering well-mapped terrain, how does a person disappear for 2 years on a familiar trail? And what did the mountain keep hidden all that time? Case 3, Geraldine Largay, Appalachian Trail, Maine. Disappeared, July 2013, found, October 2015. The notebook had moss growing on it. When Lieutenant Kevin Adam, a forester on contract with the U.S. Navy, came across the flattened tent in the dense Maine woods on October 11, 2015, he later described the moment with stark precision. The possibilities were, it was a human body, it was animal bones, or if it was a human body, was it Jerry Largay? He wrote, "I saw a flattened tent with a green backpack outside of it and a human skull with what I believe to be a sleeping bag around it. I was 99% certain that this was Jerry Largay. The campsite," he noted, "was difficult to see unless you were right next to it. The tent sat beneath several large trees whose branches blocked the sky. Geraldine had built a bedding area from small branches and pine needles, trying to keep her tent out of any standing water. She had tied a space blanket between branches overhead. She had tried to set fires. Nearby trees showed charring that investigators said appeared to be from human hands, not lightning. And nearby there was an open canopy, a clearing where she could have been spotted from the air, if only her tent had been there instead of under the trees. Geraldine Largay was 66 years old when she set out on her through hike of the Appalachian Trail in April of 2013. She had started at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and had already covered more than 1,000 of the trail's 2,168 miles by the time she reached Maine. She had earned a trail name, Inchworm, for her deliberately slow but steady pace. She was a retired Air Force nurse. She had taken a course specifically designed for this trail. She made friends easily both on and off the path. She had been hiking with a friend, Jane Lee, for much of the journey. But Jane had to leave the trip early due to a family emergency, and that departure worried her deeply. Geraldine was known, affectionately but genuinely, for having a terrible sense of direction. Jane had doubled back for her more than once, finding her wandering off the trail, looking for someone to set her right again. Jane had felt, and later said openly, that Geraldine was in over her head, attempting the rest of the journey alone. On July 22, 2013, Geraldine spoke with two women at a lean-to shelter. She told them her plan, 8.4 miles north that day, then on to a road crossing where her husband George would be waiting with resupplied provisions. He met her weekly. He was already on his way. She left the lean-to and stepped off the trail to use the restroom. She never stepped back onto it. What happened next is documented in painful detail, because Geraldine kept writing. Her journal ran continuously through her ordeal, personal letters to George and her daughter Carrie. And her phone, though it could not reach a tower from the dense wilderness she was lost in, kept a record of her attempts. At some point on July 22, she tried to text George, in some trouble. Got off trail to go to bathroom. Now lost. Can you call AMC to see if a trail maintainer can help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road. XOX. The text didn't go through. She tried to send it 12 more times. The last attempt was at 12:25 p.m. 2 hours later, another unsent message, this one blank. The next day, another attempt, lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. Call police for what to do, please. XOX. It failed. She tried once more. Nothing. By that time, George had already raised the alarm, and one of the largest search operations in Maine history was underway. Hundreds of people. Search aircraft. State police. National Park Rangers. Fire departments. Dogs. They scoured side trails and pursued tips from other hikers. Geraldine was 2 miles from the trail. Her last journal entry was written on August 18, 2013, 27 days after she left to use the restroom. The medical examiner would later rule that she died of exposure. Her final words asked whoever found her to please contact her husband and daughter, and to mail them the contents of her bag. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, she wrote, no matter how many years from now. 2 years and 3 months later, Kevin Adam found her. The unexplained detail. Geraldine Largay was 2 miles from the trail. She had maps. She had a space blanket. She had string. She had tried to signal with fire. There was a clearing nearby where she could have been seen from the air. Search aircraft flew overhead. Dogs worked the terrain. 2 miles. Investigators later noted that the campsite was situated near the border of Navy property and public land, dense, difficult terrain where the canopy was thick and the clearing she missed was just out of reach. But the question that remains is harder to shake. How does a search effort of that scale miss someone alive and signaling for nearly a month, and then miss her remains for 2 more years, at a distance of less than 2 miles from a major hiking trail? Did the Maine woods simply swallow her as they have swallowed others before? Or is there something about the way we search, about the limitations of even our best tools, that the wilderness will always be able to exploit? Case 4, Eric Robinson. Uinta Mountains, Utah. Disappeared, July 2011, found, August 2016. His itinerary was specific. 63-year-old Eric Robinson, an Australian national, had planned a 100-mile solo hike along the High Line Trail through the Uinta Mountains in northeastern Utah. He had set a start date, July 28, 2011, and a finish date. He had arranged a drop-off at the Chapeta Lake trailhead. His scheduled arrival at Mirror Lake was documented. He had recreated in the Himalayan mountains. He was, by every characterization, an experienced outdoorsman who understood wilderness travel at a serious level. He was reported missing on August 7, 2011. The Duchesne County Sheriff's Office deployed a search and rescue team the following day. The search was unsuccessful. For 5 years, Eric Robinson was simply gone. On August 19, 2016, a man from Colville, Utah, was camping near Allsup Lake in the Uinta Mountains with his 2 sons when they came across human remains alongside a backpack and a tent. They reported what they had found to authorities. Summit County Sheriff's Office investigators traveled to the area and recovered the remains and several personal items. The remains were transported to the office of the medical examiner and confirmed to be human. Due to their proximity to Robinson's personal belongings, investigators believed the remains to be his, though further DNA testing was required to make a definitive identification. The unexplained detail: Eric Robinson was an experienced wilderness traveler who had hiked in the Himalayas. The Uinta Mountains, while remote and challenging, were well within the scope of what he had done before. He had a planned route, a documented schedule, and the skills to manage the terrain. And yet he did not make it to Mirror Lake. The precise circumstances of what happened to Eric Robinson on the Highline Trail have never been publicly established. His remains were found near Allsup Lake, but what happened between his drop-off at Chapeta Lake and the moment everything went wrong, that interval belongs entirely to the mountain. When a man who has walked the Himalayas disappears in Utah, what does that tell us about the nature of wilderness itself? Is there a point at which experience stops protecting you, and something else takes over? Case 5, Riley Zickel. Mt. Jefferson Wilderness Area, Oregon. Disappeared, July 2016, found, September 2019. 340 people spent approximately 5,000 hours searching for him. They covered over 350 square miles in the Willamette National Forest around Mount Jefferson. Salem-based helicopters from the Oregon Army National Guard flew daily sweeps. Cessna aircraft from the Civil Air Patrol worked the search grid from above. For 7 days they pushed through terrain that ranged from 5,000 to 7,500 feet in elevation, through snow patches that complicated tracking even as daytime temperatures sometimes climbed toward 90 degrees. They found nothing. Riley Zickel was 21 years old, from California, when he was reported missing on July 30, 2016. He had parked his vehicle at a Jefferson Park trailhead and set out on what was planned as a simple overnight hike in the Mt. Jefferson Wilderness area. He had the appropriate equipment. He had adequate food. He was described as an experienced hiker. The plan was to return the following day and drive to Seattle to visit friends. He was last seen on the Pacific Crest Trail, just north of Jefferson Park, where another hiker passed him and exchanged brief words. Then he continued north and disappeared. After 7 days, search efforts were suspended on August 6, 2016. Marion County Sheriff's Office kept the case open, but the mountain had offered nothing. 3 years passed. Then, in 2019, a group of climbers working the high glacial terrain of Mount Jefferson contacted officials. They believed they had located a body. The area they described was steep, loose, and prone to rock avalanches, one of the most technically dangerous environments in the search zone. Marion County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Jeremy Landers confirmed that the recovery proved to be extremely challenging given the conditions. The recovery operation involved the Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue, Corvallis Mountain Rescue, the Civil Air Patrol, and the U.S. Forest Service. When the body was finally brought down, Riley Zickel's father Robin was at the trailhead, having traveled from California to be there. He watched the teams emerge from the wilderness with his son. "We are grateful to the many organizations that helped make today's recovery of Mr. Zickel possible," Marion County Sheriff Joe Cast said in a statement. "Without their contributions, we would not have been able to bring closure to the Zickel family after these 3 long years." The unexplained detail: Sergeant Landers confirmed that Riley Zickel was found within the 350 square miles that the original search teams had covered. He was inside the search zone. But he had not been found. The official explanation was practical. Portions of the initial search had been conducted from the air, and the specific glacial terrain where he was located would have been difficult to see from overhead. The steep, rockfall-prone environment made ground access in that zone exceptionally hazardous. That is a reasonable explanation. And yet, 340 people, 5,000 hours, 350 square miles, daily air support, and 3 years of continued searching. Riley was there, in the zone they were looking in the entire time. What does it mean when our most capable search operations, with the best technology and the most committed personnel, still cannot find someone we know is there? And what does the mountain keep, after it finally decides to give something back? 5 people. 5 searches that used every tool available. And the mountains held their secret for years. Not because the searches failed, but because some places simply decide what they will keep and when they will give it back. What happened out there? The wilderness already knows. It just isn't telling. If you want to uncover the unsolved mysteries and chilling crime story, Subscribe to my channel and never miss a shocking case.